Okay, so now we're going to go into our pop culture news segment. During this particular part of the show, we talk about anything that's interesting in the world of pop culture news that might have actually caught our attention. And so we just bring it up to everyone else. We talk about it here just briefly. My big pop culture news item is I brought a guest on. Anton was my contribution for pop culture news this week. So tell me, Eric, do you have anything for this week's episode in pop culture news?
I have quite a bit, actually. I'm going to start out. I always try to, if I'm going to say something negative, I always try to start out with the negative first, so that we can end on a better note. So right now, what I've got here, and actually, Dave, you were the one that initially told me about this. This is a Hollywood Reporter article from April 3rd, 2010. It says, ComicHub, briefly hailed as savior for print comics, cancels ambitious plan. I felt it was important that we talk about this because I brought the positive side of this to last week's show, where we were talking about ComicHub had this plan to basically sell digital comics over their service, over their app, and then the idea was some sort of credit would be given that could be redeemed later on at a brick and mortar retail shop, and you could get a physical copy of the book. Said the company claimed it could solve the industry shutdown caused by coronavirus. It was an idea that some heralded as the savior of the comic book industry. But just days after it was publicly discussed, ComicHub's proposed combination of print and digital sales seems to be dead in the water. The Hollywood Reporters confirmed that the previously teased announcement of the solution scheduled for Monday will no longer be forthcoming, following retail and comic book spokesman John Hendrick telling Newsarama.com that pushback from other retailers had stalled the initiative. I said, quote, "It's obvious from the concerns voiced by our peers that this isn't an initiative that they can get behind," Hendrick told the website. "But until such time as we can all agree on a solution that fellow retailers can support, there is no point in Stu Colson, the founder and owner of ComicHub, continuing this at this time." Said indeed, retailer pushback was swift to the ComicHub plan, which would have seen readers receive a digital edition of their print purchase, regardless of when the printed edition was available, in a planned workaround to the current pause of print comic distribution. The pushback was best summarized in a public Facebook post by retailer Brian Hibbs, where he wrote, quote, "I can barely make a profit from my much, much larger discounts than what the Comics Hub plan offers, and this creates an exponential amount more of work and having to track and organize such sales. All for what will be a paltry revenue, and they would not support it. I would love to reach out to a retailer and see what, like a local retailer in the Phoenix area, to see what their take was on it. But yeah, apparently the plan fell apart before it really even started.
Well, I don't know. It's one of those things. I mean, I looked at it from the standpoint just as the creator, because I do have certain titles with DC Comics I do occasionally see royalties from. And I knew that from that standpoint, in terms of like counting a sale and whatever, from a business standpoint, from a revenue share standpoint, it kind of causes, some issues for those of us on the creative side, to which, if it'll help the industry, I'm willing to forego a little bit. That's fine. I can see it from obviously the retailer standpoint. It makes sense. But listening to that comment reminds me of the things I used to hear when I was self-publishing and we were on the road with Bushy Tales, and I was trying to get retailers to pick up Bushy Tales. Those same arguments were the same reasons for why they couldn't just order Bushy Tales directly from us and why we had to go through Diamond. That kind of mentality is part of what created the problem of the single distribution system that basically got knocked on its keister by the global pandemic. So at some point, someone's going to have to look beyond, you know what I mean, and be willing to do a little bit more, you know, in order to move the industry forward. That's my own personal opinion.
I want to make this point because this point has been made in the larger context of the economy as a whole. In a lot of ways, the pandemic is being used as cover for what are fundamentally bad business practices. In other words, people are just sort of using the corona effect to justify, oh yeah, it's just because of the pandemic. You know what I mean? So if this hadn't happened, there wouldn't be any problems. The comic industry is a great example of that. The comic industry has been on life support for a long time because, as you said, of the single distribution, the direct market and the single distribution system. I've been hearing this ever since I first started going to San Diego Comic-Con, which was like in '98 or '99. And people were always predicting doom and gloom for the comic book industry because of all the bad business practices. And back then, there's still two distributors. They were small. There was Cold Cut and one other one. There were technically three distributors back then. Which one?
It might have been Capital.
There was another one. No, Capital was before my time. You know what I mean? There was another one, a very small. They only did independent books and things. Cold Cut.
Okay. Yeah.
Cold Cut only did independent books too.
Yeah.
They didn't have DC and Marvel. DC and Marvel, in my opinion, just screwed it all up. You know what I mean? With this going with one distributor. And then, of course, you know, me, I'm a big person that I really lament the loss of the newsprint, you know, and the spinner rack and all that, and the returnables, which I think was a big help. Obviously, there were reasons that happened, but I'm just saying that was, I think, bad for the industry as a whole. So it just as in other parts of the economy, my point is, I think fundamental flaws in the comic industry have been exposed by the pandemic. That's my point. And so the flaws were already there. Now they're bare for everyone to see, and it's really questionable what's going to happen. It's really questionable what's going to happen.
Yeah, well, we'll have to see. We'll have to see how this bears out. You know, at the end of the day, the people who have always kept the comic industry afloat has always been the fans.
Correct.
You know, been the readers. It's the people who love and appreciate the material. They're the ones who keep it going. So whether Diamond is there or not, I think at the end of the day, the readers, the fans, the people who love comics, they would have been the ones who would have kept it going in whatever form that it would have taken on. Whether it would have been a more, you know, publisher direct to you using Kickstarter and Indiegogo and things such as like as the distribution channel, whether it would be, you know, selling digital copies.
That's already happening
or whatever. So
that's already happening. That's how we did our book, the book that we collaborated on. We didn't use any distribution method other than the one you did ourselves. So I think that's a great example of probably where the industry is heading. And we did digital and we did physical. That's the other point I want to make. And I see all sorts of independent creators doing that path. You know, look at Brian Pulido and all of his success, where he's breaking records with his Kickstarters and things like that. I mean, you know, over $100,000 a pop. You know, and although he does use Diamond, that's not where he's making his money. That's not what's keeping Coffin Comics going. You know what I mean? It's those Kickstarters. You know, so I think you just nailed on the head. That's the future of the industry.
Yeah.
It's not about print or digital. It's about getting your product directly to the consumer. And Diamond, I don't know. I think your days are numbered. That's my opinion. Really do.
Yeah.